have you ever stared at your investment account balance and wondered if you're making any real progress toward building wealth? Maybe you've got a few $1,000s saved up, or perhaps you've been grinding away for years and finally hit 20,000 or 30,000. Either way, that $1 million milestone feels impossibly far away, doesn't it? Well, what if I told you that once you reach $100,000, you're already closer to becoming a millionaire than you might think? In fact, you'd be exactly one-third of the way there, which sounds almost too good to be true. I spend way too much time thinking about money, compound interest, and why most people never seem to escape the paycheck-to-paycheck cycle. If you're someone who actually wants to understand how wealth building really works, instead of just hoping for the best, make sure to hit that subscribe button and give this video a thumbs up if it ends up being helpful. Now, before we dive into the math that makes this whole thing work, let me paint you a picture of what most people think wealth building looks like. They imagine it's this perfectly linear process where each dollar you save gets you exactly $1 closer to your goal. Save 10,000, you're 10,000 closer. Save 50,000, you're 50,000 closer. Simple, right? Wrong. Dead wrong. Actually, this kind of thinking is exactly why so many people give up on investing before they ever see the real magic happen. They look at their measly account balance after a few years of contributions and think to themselves, at this rate, I'll be dead before I ever hit $1 million. And honestly, if money worked the way most people think it does, they'd probably be right. But here's the thing that changes everything. Money doesn't just sit there doing nothing when you invest it properly. It starts working for you, earning returns, and then those returns start earning returns. This isn't some get-rich-quick scheme or financial fairy tale. It's basic mathematics that has been creating millionaires for decades, yet somehow most people either don't understand it or don't believe it actually works. The secret lies in understanding compound interest, which Albert Einstein supposedly called the eighth wonder of the world. Now, whether Einstein actually said that or not is debatable, but the sentiment is absolutely correct. Those who understand compound interest can build serious wealth over time. Those who don't will spend their entire lives wondering why they can't seem to get ahead financially. Let me show you exactly how this works with some real numbers that might surprise you. Imagine you decide to invest $100 every single week. That's roughly $400 per month, which isn't chump change, but it's not exactly an impossible amount for most working adults either. We're talking about the cost of dining out a few times, or maybe what you might spend on streaming services, coffee runs, and impulse purchases throughout the month. Now, assuming your investments earn an average return of 8% annually, which is actually quite conservative compared to historical stock market performance, here's where things get interesting. It takes approximately 12 years of consistent weekly contributions to reach your first $100,000. 12 years might sound like forever, especially when you're just starting out, but think about it this way. 12 years ago, were you the same person you are today? Time has a funny way of passing whether you're building wealth or not. During those first 12 years, most of the money accumulating in your account comes directly from your own contributions. You're essentially doing the heavy lifting while compound interest is still warming up on the bench. Out of that $100,000, roughly $62,000 comes from your weekly contributions, while the remaining $38,000 represents the returns your money has generated. Not bad for money that's just sitting there, working for you. But admittedly, it's not going to change your life overnight. Here's where most people make a critical mistake. They look at those numbers and think the process is too slow, or they get discouraged because the returns don't seem impressive enough. What they don't realize is that they've just completed the hardest part of the entire journey. They've built the foundation that will support everything that comes next. Remember, we're trying to get to $1 million, and you've just hit $100,000. In traditional thinking, you'd assume you're on 1/10 of the way there, but compound interest doesn't work that way. The truth is far more encouraging than that. From this point forward, your money starts working much harder for you. Those investment returns that seemed modest during the first 12 years begin to snowball in ways that will genuinely surprise you. The next milestone is $200,000. And here's the kicker. It only takes about 6 more years to get there. Let me repeat that because it's important. It took 12 years to go from $0 to $100,000, but only 6 additional years to double that amount. We're now 18 years into your investment journey, and you're sitting at $200,000. The math is starting to shift in your favor in a big way. At this point, compound interest is really beginning to flex its muscles. Of that $200,000, you've personally contributed roughly $94,000 through your weekly investments. The other $106,000, that's pure investment growth. Your money has been quietly working in the background, earning returns on returns, and suddenly those gains are becoming substantial. But here's the part that will blow your mind. Even though you've only reached $200,000, you're actually halfway to becoming a millionaire. Not one, if the way there. Not one quarter, but halfway. This is where that original claim about being one of the way at 100,000 starts to make sense. The reason this works is that compound interest is exponential, not linear. Each dollar of growth generates its own future growth, creating this snowball effect that accelerates over time. It's like pushing a boulder up a hill. The beginning is brutal and exhausting, but once you reach the top and that boulder starts rolling downhill, momentum takes over. Now, you might be wondering what happens during the final stretch toward that $1 million goal. This is where things get really exciting and, honestly, a little bit addictive. During the next 18 years, as you continue making those same weekly contributions, compound interest becomes the dominant force in your wealth building. By the time you hit the 36-year mark, you've reached that coveted 7-figure milestone. You've personally contributed approximately $187,000 over more than 3 decades, but your account balance shows over $1 million. That means more than 80% of your wealth came from compound growth rather than your own contributions. Think about what this means in practical terms. You're now earning roughly $80,000 per year just from investment returns. Remember how long it took you to accumulate your first 100,000? Now you're generating almost that much annually without lifting a finger. The beautiful part about this whole process is that it doesn't require you to live like a monk or make dramatic sacrifices to your lifestyle. We're talking about setting aside $100 per week, which for many people represents nothing more than being slightly more conscious about discretionary spending. This isn't about depriving yourself of everything enjoyable in life. It's about making small, consistent choices that compound over time into something truly remarkable. The person who understands this principle and acts on it will build substantial wealth. The person who keeps waiting for the perfect moment or the perfect amount will likely spend their entire life wondering what could have been. The acceleration becomes even more dramatic as you move beyond that million mark. By year 45, you're looking at over $2 million, and your investments are generating more than $160,000 annually in returns alone. At this point, your money is making more money each year than most people earn at their jobs. Now, I know what some of you are thinking. This all sounds great in theory, but, what about inflation? What about market crashes? What about the fact that I can barely scrape together $50 at the end of the month, let alone $100? These are fair questions, and honestly, they're the kinds of questions that separate people who build wealth from people who spend their entire lives making excuses. Let's address the elephant in the room first. The 8% return I've been using in these calculations is actually adjusted for inflation. The stock market has historically returned closer to 10% annually, but we're being conservative here because nobody wants to plan their retirement based on overly optimistic projections. That's how you end up eating cat food in your golden years. As for market crashes, yes, they happen. Your account balance will go down sometimes. In fact, it will probably go down quite a bit during certain periods. But here's something interesting that most people don't realize. Market downturns actually help you if you're consistently investing over decades. When prices drop, your weekly $100 contribution buys more shares. When the market recovers, and it always has historically, those extra shares you picked up during the downturn become incredibly valuable. It's like shopping for groceries when everything goes on sale. Sure, it might feel scary to keep buying when prices are falling, but rational investors understand that temporary pain leads to long-term gain. The people who panic and sell during market downturns are essentially buying high and selling low, which is the exact opposite of what successful investors do. But let's get back to that claim about not being able to find $100 per week. I hear this a lot, and while I understand that everyone's financial situation is different, I also think most people underestimate how much money flows through their hands without they really noticing where it goes. The average American household spends over $600 per month on food, and that includes both groceries and dining out. If you could reduce that by just 25% through meal planning, cooking at home more often, and being strategic about restaurant visits, you'd free up $150 monthly right there. That's more than your weekly investment goal. Or consider transportation costs. The average car payment in America is now over $700 per month. $700 for something that depreciates in value the moment you drive it off the lot. If you could find a reliable used vehicle and cut that payment in half, you'd have enough to fund your investment account and still have money left over. I'm not suggesting you should eat ramen noodles every meal or drive a car held together with duct tape, but I am suggesting that most people have more flexibility in their budgets than they realize. The problem is that we've become accustomed to certain lifestyle expectations that weren't necessarily based on sound financial reasoning. Here's something else that makes this whole process easier than you might expect. As your investment account grows, something psychological happens that actually accelerates your wealth building. You start to notice the monthly growth in your balance, and it becomes genuinely exciting to watch. Instead of viewing investing as a sacrifice, you begin to see it as the most rewarding thing you do with your money. This excitement motivates you to look for additional ways to boost your contributions. Maybe you decide to invest your tax refund instead of spending it on something you'll forget about in 6 months. Perhaps you redirect money from lifestyle inflation when you get a raise at work. You might even start a side business specifically to generate more investment capital. When you see your money growing substantially each month without any additional effort from you, finding ways to feed that growth becomes a priority. This shift in mindset separates those who build significant wealth from those who remain stuck in the spending cycle forever. The wealthy think differently about money and time. They understand that every dollar has the potential to become multiple dollars through compound growth. And this understanding influences every financial decision they make. That expensive dinner isn't just costing them $100 tonight. It's potentially costing them several hundred in lost investment growth over the coming decades. Now, let's talk about why reaching that $100,000 milestone is such a psychological game-changer. There's something magical that happens when you see a six-figure balance in your investment account. Suddenly, the concept of becoming a millionaire shifts from fantasy to realistic possibility. Before you hit 100,000, investment returns might generate a few thousand in a good year. Nice, but not exactly life-changing. Once you cross that threshold, annual returns can easily exceed $10,000, and in exceptional years, you might see gains of $20,000 or more. These aren't theoretical numbers anymore. They're real money that could cover major expenses or fund significant life changes. This is when people start to understand viscerally why Charlie Muir famously said the first 100,000 is the hardest to accumulate. It's not just about the math, though the math is certainly compelling. It's about developing the habits, mindset, and discipline that make long-term wealth building possible. The person who successfully saves and invests their first 100,000 has proven they can delay gratification, stick to a plan through market volatility, and prioritize long-term goals over immediate desires. These characteristics become increasingly valuable as investment balances grow larger and the stakes become higher. There's also the opportunity factor to consider. When you have substantial savings invested, you gain options that simply don't exist for people living paycheck to paycheck. Maybe a better job. Opportunity comes along, but it's with a smaller company that offers equity compensation instead of a guaranteed salary. Without financial reserves, most people can't take that risk. With a solid investment foundation, you can afford to bet on yourself. Perhaps you've always wanted to start a business, but you needed capital to get it off the ground. Or maybe an incredible real estate opportunity presents itself, but it requires a down payment that you don't have sitting in your checking account. These scenarios happen constantly, but they're only available to people who have built up financial resources through consistent saving and investing. The beautiful irony is that the same habits that got you to $100,000 make the journey to $1 million much more achievable. You've already developed the discipline to live below your means, the patience to weather market fluctuations, and the wisdom to prioritize long-term wealth over short-term consumption. Plus, as your income naturally increases throughout your career, those weekly contributions don't have to stay at $100 forever. The person who starts investing $100 a week at age 25 might be contributing $300 or $400 weekly by age 40. The early habit of consistent investing creates the foundation for accelerated wealth building later in life. But here's something most financial advisors won't tell you, probably because it doesn't sell expensive investment products. The hardest part of this entire process isn't understanding compound interest or picking the right investments. The hardest part is developing the discipline to stick with the plan when everything around you is screaming for immediate gratification. We live in a culture that worships instant everything. Instant coffee, instant messaging, instant credit approval, instant streaming, instant food delivery. The idea of waiting 36 years for anything sounds absolutely barbaric to most people. They'd rather finance a luxury car today than drive a reliable used vehicle and invest the difference. They'd rather have the latest smartphone than contribute to their investment account and upgrade when their current phone actually stops working. This is why most people never build wealth, despite living in the most prosperous society in human history. It's not because they don't earn enough money, though that's the excuse they prefer. It's because they've never learned to delay gratification long enough for compound interest to work its magic. The people who do build wealth aren't necessarily smarter or more disciplined than everyone else. They just have a different relationship with time and money. They understand that boring consistency beats exciting speculation almost every single time. While others are chasing the latest cryptocurrency or trying to time the market, successful investors are quietly adding to their index funds month after month, year after year. And let's be honest about something else. The math I've shown you assumes you never increase your contributions, never receive any employer matching in a retirement account, and never make any additional lump sum investments. In reality, most people's wealth building accelerates significantly beyond these conservative projections. Your employer might match 50 cents for every dollar you contribute to your company retirement plan. That's an instant 50% return before your money even gets invested. You might receive tax refunds, bonuses, or inheritance money that gets added to your investment accounts. You could start a side business that generates additional income specifically earmarked for wealth building. All of these factors work in your favor, but they're not included in our calculations because we wanted to show what's possible with just consistent weekly contributions. The reality is usually much better than the projections, not worse. Now, some of you might be wondering about the specific investments that make this whole strategy work. After all, earning 8% annually isn't guaranteed, and choosing the wrong investments could derail your entire plan. This is a valid concern, but it's also simpler to address than most people think. For the vast majority of investors, especially those just starting out, a simple index fund that tracks the total stock market is perfectly adequate. You're not trying to beat the market, you're trying to match it. And over long periods, matching the market has created more millionaires than any other investment strategy in history. The S&P 500 has averaged over 10% annually for decades, even accounting for major crashes, recessions, and world wars. Could that change in the future? Absolutely. But betting against the continued growth of human innovation and productivity is a losing proposition that I wouldn't want to make. The key is avoiding the temptation to get fancy with your investment strategy. You don't need to pick individual stocks, chase hot sectors, or try to time market movements. In fact, doing any of these things will probably hurt your returns more than help them. The most successful investors are often the most boring ones. So, there you have it. Reaching $100,000 isn't just another milestone on your way to becoming a millionaire. It's actually proof that you're already 1/3 of the way there. The math doesn't lie, even if it seems almost too good to be true. Time and compound interest are working in your favor, but only if you give them the chance. Start investing consistently today, because 36 years from now, you'll either be thanking yourself or wondering what could have been.